Have Deborah Cunningham and Carl Thurno speak to us about the New York State Building Conditions Survey. Before we get started, I just wanted to notify you of the ways you can interact with us during the webinar. If you want to ask a question via text, there's two different ways you can do that. On your GoToWebinar control panel, there's going to be a question pane and there's a chat pane. If you type your question into either of those at any time, I'll be monitoring that, and I'll bring it up to our speaker's attention, and we'll have your question answered that way. If you want to ask a question over the phone, you need to make sure you've typed in your audio pin, which is located on the audio pane of your GoToWebinar control panel. Just go ahead and type that right into your phone. And then if you want to ask a question, there's a button that looks like a circle with a hand on it. That's the raise your hand button. Hit that. That'll notify me you want to ask a question over the phone, and we'll put you right through to Carl. With that out of the way, I'm going to turn it over to Deborah.
Thank you, Matt. I am Deborah Cunningham. I'm Director of Education and Research for the New York State Association of School Business Officials, and it's a pleasure for me to introduce this topic, which is to make the most of your 2015 Building Conditions Survey and how you can use available state resources to fully investigate the condition of your school facilities and to prioritize future capital construction needs. School facilities, we all know, are a critical part of education and a significant part of the business management of the school districts. So it is with pleasure that I introduce our presenter today, Carl T. Thurno. Mr. Thurno is the Director of the New York State Education Department's Office of Facilities Planning. His primary responsibility is the health and safety of all New York State students and staff attending public schools. He accomplishes this task with a staff of architects, engineers, project managers, and support staff. The office is the authority having jurisdiction for all code compliance in public schools outside New York City. And Carl and his staff review, approve, and issue building permits for over 2,000 capital construction projects each year with a value of approximately $2 billion. In addition, his staff manages the annual fire safety inspection process on over 8,000 school facilities each year and issues annual certificates of occupancy for all public school buildings outside of New York City. Carl is a professional engineer with over 25 years of experience in public sector contracting. He came to the Education Department in 1996 and has managed the Office of Facilities Planning during a time of significant change, which included a 300% increase in the school construction workload over historic levels due to various funding incentives and an aging infrastructure in our school buildings. So it was a pleasure for me to welcome Carl Thurno. And Carl, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Deborah. It's a pleasure to be here. Hopefully this topic is not completely unfamiliar to most of the listeners. This will be the fourth Building Conditions Survey. This grew, as most of you know, out of the 1998 rescue regulations, and the first Building Conditions Survey was in the year 2000, and every 5 years since, so 2005, 10, and now 2015 we're gearing up for. So if we take a step backwards and look at the original purpose for the program, the Comprehensive Public School Safety Program was the original purpose for the Building Conditions Survey, and you see the regulatory citation there. To ensure that all school facilities are properly maintained and preserved and provide suitable educational facilities. So we asked districts to do the BCS so that you can use the data to inform your required 5-year capital facilities plan. And then the 5-year capital facilities plan itself is a different document. Every school district in BOCES shall use the safety rating of their occupied facilities in developing or amending their 5-year plan, and such plan shall identify the critical maintenance needs. And that safety rating is established in the BCS with help from the district's architects, engineers, Board of Education, and the Health and Safety Committee within the school district to help identify all the issues that may be present in your facilities. So the actual survey requires a team that includes at least one licensed architect and engineer. We suggest that it is impossible to do a thorough building condition survey with just one licensed professional. We believe that in order to do it properly, the team should include professionals of all disciplines, such as mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, plumbing engineers if necessary, structural engineers, and so forth. The survey of occupied structures, and we do not consider press boxes and concession stands and so forth to be normally occupied. They are occupied on limited occasions for specific events, but they're not normally occupied during the school day. And those are not required to be surveyed. But the survey shall include, but not be limited to, all program spaces and the following system components for evidence of movement, deterioration, structural failure, probable useful life, need for repair, need for maintenance, and need for replacement. Those are the critical things that we're looking at each system for: movement, deterioration, structural failure, etc. And then the regulations actually go on to say specifically what those systems are that need investigation. And as you can see in the following slides, they cover soup to nuts, everything from the roofing and exterior walls and doors and windows to building structural elements, interior finishes, doors, hardware, all the way down through electrical, plumbing, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, special construction, which would be your elevators, escalators, swimming pools, and of course fire protection. Last but not least, environmental features: appearance, cleanliness, acoustics, lighting quality. These all contribute to whether or not the building can successfully deliver the educational program. So to repeat the requirement, the inspection is intended to determine for each building system its actual condition: evidence of movement, deterioration, structural failure, probable useful life, need for repair, need for maintenance, and need for replacement. So if we think back in time, some of you may remember when we had the catastrophic structural ceiling collapse, roof collapse in Washingtonville Central Schools, and ultimately that was determined to be significantly deteriorated roof trusses that were of such a design that the bottom cord of the roof truss collected and retained water, which ultimately rusted through the roof trusses after a significant period of time. The reason that was not discovered is because there was no access above the ceiling to discover why the ceilings in that area continued to turn yellow over time. And then instead of cutting an access panel and researching what was going on, the district maintained the ceiling by painting it with custodial staff. So in a previous building condition survey, we said, hey, based on this event, we need to make sure that we are really looking at every system in every location. And if you have inaccessible locations, nook and cranny of your facility. As a result of that issue and the discovery of the destruction or the deterioration in that school facility, districts did go out and do that, and I don't recall which building condition survey it was, whether it was, I think it was 2005. We discovered at least a dozen more locations where significant structural deterioration had happened, but fortunately had not reached the point of structural compromise. And the discoveries made during that were submitted to this office for immediate approval for structural projects to correct those deteriorated conditions. And those are the kinds of things that we need to make sure that we are catching in a building condition survey. And you can't catch that with a cursory inspection, and you can't catch that without thorough, knowledgeable, and experienced professionals who are literally crawling throughout your facility to identify all of the needs of the building. The timeline for the building condition survey: all surveys must be completed by November 15th, in this case 2015, and the data must be submitted to NYSED by the following January 15th, in this case 2016. And then I put a little parentheses there because, as most of you may remember, we have had difficulty in the department getting our data collection system available in the appropriate time frame. I have to admit that facilities is not the highest priority IT priority in the department, and if you think about what's in the news today, facilities planning, while certainly important, is not Common Core, it's not teacher evaluations, it's not all those other things, and so we occasionally have to extend our deadline because we don't get the IT resources in a time frame which we need to get up and running by that deadline. So if we do have to extend the deadline, then we will publish that in our newsletter and on our website so that districts are aware that the January 15th reporting deadline has been extended. However, keep in mind, there is a separate statutory deadline that says you must complete your inspections by November 15th of 2015. We don't expect any significant changes to the format or the questions. We will provide some, I'm certain, but they hopefully will be minor. We will again consult with New York State Department of Health, and we should have the final format available next spring. Some of the things that we may consider adding are potentially safety and security questions, so we can get an idea of the level of security that exists in schools, something of that nature. If, in fact, we do that, it wouldn't be whether or not you have security or whether or not you believe your security is adequate, but that this is an existing condition survey. So if you have security systems, we would be asking about the life cycle of those security systems, if they're adequate in terms of their functionality and their capability, not in terms of the perception of the students or administrators, for example, and whether they feel safe. Most importantly, I think, to a lot of districts is, how do I get paid? We will not be able to tell you the specific reimbursement rate until next summer because the law requires that the Department of Labor provide us with the latest labor rates, and that won't happen for the survey, for the 2015 survey, until summer 2015. They'll provide us with the labor rate increases since the previous survey in 2010. We do, however, anticipate that the funding will be in the neighborhood of 27 cents a square foot to be paid at the district's current aid ratio. And by current, I mean you do not have the option of selecting the selected aid ratio. It will be paid based on the current aid ratio. So you will, as you did previously in 2010, you'll submit the survey forms to facilities planning through our online data submission process, and you'll submit a separate SAMS Form FB to State Aid Unit. And State Aid, just for your information, State Aid will provide a database to State Aid. They will cross-check our database to see that your data has been received prior to processing any aid claims. So you won't be able to receive aid unless we have actually received your data. Expenses can be incurred now, beginning in the 14-15 school year and in the 2015-16 school year. And just a cautionary note, because there are specific deadlines contained in statute, we will not be able to aid any expenses that are incurred after the January 15th, 2016 or modified closing date. So that does give you a little bit of a window, because in theory we should hold you to expenses incurred after prior to November 15th, because that's the deadline when the survey is supposed to be completed. However, in reality, you're also paying your consultants to input that data on your behalf, and there's costs associated with that. So we will allow expenses incurred up to the January 15th or modified deadline. Certainly not after that, and I think that seems reasonable to everyone. The actual reimbursement will be limited to the lesser of the actual survey cost or the survey square foot threshold multiplied by the current aid ratio. So again, if you spend more than 27 cents a square foot, then you'll receive 27 cents. If that is the final number, you'll receive that number multiplied by your current aid ratio. I don't believe we've ever had a district reach the actual threshold, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but most districts will be getting reimbursed their actual survey costs multiplied by their aid ratio. Various costs are acceptable to incur during the BCS for reimbursement, and you can contract those costs directly, or you can run all your expenses through your AE firm. For example, you could hire your AE firm to do the survey. You could independently hire someone to do a roof scan. You could independently hire someone to do electrical testing and so forth. And then you would take all those costs, add them up, convert it to a square foot cost, and submit it to state aid. Or you could simply have your AE firm hire the various subcontractors or sub-testing firms that are necessary to complete your survey, and have the AE firm submit that in one cost converted to a square foot cost. So, maximizing your return, what exactly is eligible? We believe that this is an extremely generous program. I am involved in a national association of state school facility directors, folks in my position from other states, and I can tell you that they are all very well impressed by the fact that New York State is willing to spend as much as $40 million every 5 years to pay you to become intimately familiar with the quality of your current facilities. No other state that I am aware of provides this effort. And of course, this is just a precursor. Once you know what's wrong with your facilities, we pay a significant amount of money to help you fix those facilities based on what you've discovered is wrong with them during the building condition survey. I just made a similar presentation yesterday at the Council of School Superintendents, and a fellow presenter was from Pennsylvania, and their average school district reimbursement at the state level is somewhere between 3 and 8%, regardless of the size of the project. So think about the dollar amounts that you may have spent in your particular school district over the last X number of years, and your typical reimbursement rate. It's obviously different for all of you, but on average statewide it's about 72 to 74%, and compare that with an average in Pennsylvania of 3 to 8%, and you begin to understand how truly generous New York State is with its reimbursement ratios. There are certainly some school districts in New York State that get less than 10%, are at a minimum of 10% now because of the incentive, but on the other end of the scale, we have districts receiving 98%, and in fact can do projects for free because you can use additional funding streams such as Excel in order to accomplish your needs. So we do have a very robust program, and we encourage you to take advantage of it. So eligible items: actual survey team direct expenses for conducting the survey. We allow you to digitize paper documents. Hopefully most of you have gone back into your dusty archives and pulled out all those crinkly, wrinkly documents and digitized them so that you have current state-of-the-art electronic records that you can save off-site as well in an easy format. And those documents obviously can and should be used by your architects and engineering firms to develop plans and specs, and that'll cut down on their time in drafting new documents for you. Again, we want to look at detailed structural engineering inspection. The purpose of this is the building conditions survey, the discovery of the existing conditions in your facilities. So if we expand the thought on that, any testing that is necessary to discover the actual condition of an existing system is eligible for reimbursement. And I throw in some examples here. So again, any testing or inspection necessary to determine, back to the purpose, determine evidence of movement, evidence of deterioration, evidence of structural failure, probable useful life, need for repair, etc. It's that simple. So if you need to do a roof scan, if you need to do boiler treatment chemical analysis to determine if your piping is in good condition, if you need to do arc flash testing on your electrical switchgear, if you need to do underground steel tank testing, pressure vessel testing, load testing on your generators, camera inspection of sewer and storm lines, anything that you need to reasonably do to determine the actual condition of a building system is an acceptable expense. Non-eligible items: purchase or development or implementation of a maintenance plan or work order tracking program, development of a comprehensive maintenance plan, data collection for the purpose of entering into a maintenance module, pre-construction survey and planning. Example, if you need to test for the presence of lead or asbestos, that's not appropriate in a building condition survey. If you know you have lead and asbestos, then evaluating the condition of that material as part of the BCS is appropriate. Again, you should all have, for asbestos, for example, you should all have an AHERA plan. So paying your architect and engineer to go around and assess the condition of the asbestos, maybe the pipe wrap in the crawl space, maybe the refractory in the boiler room, the condition, floor tiles popping, the condition of that asbestos is an appropriate survey cost, but not to determine whether or not those, in this case, hazardous materials actually exist in the facility. That would be pre-construction survey or project planning, which would not be appropriate for this purpose. So anything else that is not directly related to that analysis to determine evidence of movement, deterioration, structural failure, etc. So if it's directly related and you can show that you needed to do some testing in order to determine the condition, it's appropriate, and if not, it's not. We try to streamline this as much as possible. So if we step back and think about that, for example, that really does require a thorough investigation on your part and your team's part to determine the existing condition. So instead of just walking around on the roof and saying, gee, things look pretty good, I don't see any cracks, I don't see any pulling away from the parapet, the termination bars seem fine, the drains look okay, you could go further than that if you have a concern. Maybe you always have a leak in a particular area over the last couple of years, but you think you fixed it. Well, there's no reason you can't hire someone to do a roof scan, x-ray, in that area to determine, is that insulation all wet? Maybe you did fix it. It's not leaking any longer, but it's still saturated. That would be good information to know. Sometimes your roof drains leak. You might be interested in putting a camera down there to see if, in fact, they're becoming plugged with roof gravel or leaves or any other obstruction that would cause a potential problem. Those are just examples, but anything that you need to do in order to determine the condition of that existing facility is an appropriate cost. And those costs are the types of things that will tend to bring your cost of the survey closer to the 27 cents a square foot, for example. So please take this seriously. As I mentioned, this is a significant effort that the state is willing to undertake. It's rare, it's unique. We have, as I mentioned, budgeted on a 5-year basis $40 million. In truth, we've never spent more than 25. 22, I think, was the last one. So use this to your best advantage. We cringe when we see things called drive-by inspections. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of firms that are all of a sudden going to crawl all over New York and say, hey, I can do a building survey for you. I do them all the time, etc. Personally, those firms are sometimes firms that do not normally work in school design and construction in New York State. They come in just for this opportunity. They may very well be survey firms, but they're not familiar to you and your colleagues, and the surveys are often extremely low priced, meaning I've seen them as low as 3 cents a square foot. Personally, I don't believe, although you may be meeting the technical statutory requirements, the letter of the law, so to speak, I don't believe that those types of inspections are going to give you the detailed information that you need to properly plan for your construction, your modernization of your facilities. The bottom line is it is a comprehensive and it's a professional effort. And I think based on some of the examples I've given, if you're paying in the neighborhood of 3 or 4 cents a square foot, I don't believe that you're going to get the detailed data that you need to properly develop a comprehensive plan in order to keep your facilities in good repair. So please be careful of that. You do get what you pay for. We're cautioning you to talk to multiple vendors, do comparison shopping. We have little sympathy for emergencies which arise out of poor planning. I hope people understand by now that one of the things that we do use this information for is to evaluate district projects when they get submitted. So for example, if you submit to me a project for renovation of a facility and included in that is the heating system and the roof, for example, and I open your building condition survey, or ask my project managers to, and it says the roof is in great shape and it has a 15-year useful life, and your heating system is in great shape and that's got a 20-year useful life, and the project includes roofing and boilers, then we're going to have concerns and we're going to ask additional questions. They may be able to be overcome by you, and they may not. We do reject projects all the time because, hey, you told us in your professional's evaluation that these items were going to last another 15 years. If that was only 3 years ago, for example, what happened in the meantime? Did you fail to spend adequate maintenance monies? Or did you spend available money on other things that were lower priorities than maintaining your existing infrastructure? So we do have these conversations with districts, and we are forced on numerous occasions every year to tell a district that you are not going to get aid for that piece of your project, or we're going to prorate the aid for that project because of the data that you submitted to us and the conflicting nature of that data based on the project now submitted to us. So we do take it seriously, and we, again, have little sympathy for these emergencies, and particularly those that appear to arise out of poor planning. If the wind comes up and tears off your roof, that's an emergency regardless of how old the roof was. So we're not going to argue about true emergencies, but there is certainly a significant difference of opinion in many cases when you believe you have a local emergency and we're not willing to agree with you on the state level. That can cause significant problems for districts because while you can declare it an emergency, you need to spend cash because you don't have voter authorization, and we do not agree it's an emergency, and therefore we're going to reimburse you over 15 years, which means that you're out your money up front and you won't get all of your money back until a period of 15 years has passed, which can put you in a significant financial disadvantage over a period of time. I hope this was helpful. It's pretty short and sweet. We tried to make it as plain as possible. In other words, we're not trying to make it difficult. We want you to be able to spend the monies that you need to spend in order to do a thorough and professional survey. We do understand that the higher the cost of the survey, ultimately, the higher the local share because it is reimbursed at your current aid ratio. But I would offer a couple of words. And over the life of a school facility, if you look at operational costs versus construction costs and maintenance costs, you have your initial construction costs, you have your ongoing maintenance costs, and on the other side of that, you have operations, which is your heat, your light, your air conditioning, and you have staffing costs. And the costs associated with teaching staff in a building and custodial staff and administrative staff, etc., is many tens of times more than the cost of the facilities over the life of the facility. The infrastructure needs of the facility actually are pennies on the dollar compared to the total investment in that school. And based on the fact that state ed is willing to reimburse a significant portion of your expenses, both to figure out what's wrong with your facilities and then to correct those deficiencies. We think that is money well spent, and time and again we see districts that have gotten into significant trouble over time because they do not take advantage of the reimbursement formulas on a regular basis. The formulas are intended to be used regularly, and a good example of that is the district who has a Board of Education or an administration who, in their view, holds down taxes for 20 years, for example, by not doing bond issues and not putting money into the facilities. And then coming to us at State Ed and say, hey, we need to do a $40 million project. It just doesn't look like the cost allowance is going to cover it. We only have a $15 million cost allowance. So because we haven't used building aid in 20 or 25 years, can we double or triple up on our cost allowance and get the whole project covered because, you know, we didn't do any projects for so long? The answer is absolutely not. You will get the maximum cost allowance associated with that facility based on its enrollment, and if that forces you to do only a third of the work, you have a choice to make. You can do a third of the work and come back 5 years later for another third and so forth. Of course, in that 5 years, the facilities, those portions of the facilities that did not get fixed will continue to deteriorate at an accelerated rate because they've not been maintained. And at some point in time, you may find yourself with emergency situations that will not receive aid because you have no cost allowance available in a 5-year window. Compare that with a district that spends the cost allowance every 5 years. You'll never reach the point where you have a $40 million project for a particular facility simply because over time things have been maintained in stages. 5 years ago it had a new roof. 5 years before that it had new windows, etc. So this time maybe you need to do the heating system and the fire alarm system. But over time, on average, the age of the building may only be 15-year equivalent or 20-year equivalent as opposed to a 60-year-old facility on average. So the value of investing in the facilities is significant, and properly managed can result in a level debt service without significant swings in tax effort to manage your facilities. We encourage you to use the formulas to your best advantage. The state of New York does provide significant funding, and we try to make it easy to access. It does require voter authorization, but the building condition survey itself is the first step in that process, and the better you can take advantage of the building condition survey to fully understand the deficiencies within your existing facilities, the better prepared you'll be to develop your 5-year plan and to ask your voters for support when it comes time for a capital improvement project. So with that, I think I'll stop and open it up to any questions that might be available.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Kelly. She wants to know, we are hearing a lot about an electrical arc survey in my area. Is this something that can and or should be included in the BCS?
It can be included. Arc flash testing is a method of testing to determine if your electrical switchgear has the capability of withstanding the rating that it was designed for. Over time, electrical components can deteriorate, and it's not always obvious whether or not they are still rated for what they were manufactured at. And so arc flash testing is a method of helping determine that. If you're, after talking to your professionals, you think that that is an appropriate test that you should do, then yes, you can have that testing performed as part of the building condition survey and reimbursed as part of the building condition survey. I would say that that's a question that you should talk to your electrical engineers about, and they can review the specific equipment, the manufacturer, review any history with that equipment in the industry as a whole and in your specific case, and determine whether that test is appropriate. That is one of the examples I used in my example of appropriate testing.
All right, thank you. And we have a question from Jay O'Connor. While you were here, can you talk a bit about the multi-year cost allowance and how districts are notified of the remaining cost allowance when a project is being considered?
Okay, the cost allowance, as many folks know, we have gone to what we call a rolling cost allowance, and let's just use a $10 million example. If we calculate that your cost allowance is $10 million, you have the ability to use that cost allowance in a 5-year window. So if in year 1 you do a $4 million project, and in year 3 you do a $2 million project, that's $6 million over 3 years. In the next 2 years, you only have a $4 million cost allowance available. If you needed to do a project in the 4th year for $5 million, then you would only receive aid on $1 million, and the other $1 million would be at 100% local share. So what it requires districts to do is plan their capital projects accordingly. And it's a rolling 5 years. So, for example, in that example, I said if you do $4 million in year 2, you know, in year in year 7, that $4 million rolls off because it's more than 5 years old. And so you can look ahead and see how much cost allowance you're going to have available at different points in time, and your project managers would be happy to work with you on that. But we do provide that information when you come to us with a proposal, and we'll tell you at that point whether you have an issue in either your construction cost allowance or your incidental cost allowance. If you think about many districts doing projects involving what we affectionately call the loophole, site work, right? If you do a $10,000 project, you may get $3 million of synthetic turf field and other site improvements. So maybe you have you've used your entire incident allowance. Now you have a significant roof leak, and your roof is at an age where it needs to be ripped off and replaced. That's a couple $1 million project, which is going to involve significant incidental costs for design and so forth. You may have absolutely no incidental allowance available because you spent it all on a previous site work project. You're welcome to proceed with that roof project, and in some cases you'll have to if the roof is leaking that bad, but we will not provide any incidental allowance, and you would get no aid on all the incidental costs associated with that roof project in that example. The other possibility would be to try and maintain or band-aid that roof until you got a new cost allowance after the appropriate time had expired. So that's how that works, and we do watch both the construction and the incidental allowances, and we manage them separately.
Okay, thank you. If anyone else has a question for Carl, please feel free to type in the chat window or in the question window.
Yes, I have a question. This is Deborah Cunningham for Carl. It's really quite impressive when you look at, in the last 10 years, the significant state investment in assessing the condition of our school buildings. It seems it's a recognition by the state that this steady management and maintenance of our school buildings is of critical importance. And I'm interested in those school districts where they may need to do some catching up, and they are perhaps have deferred maintenance, and they've got some serious problems. And I'm wondering what are different resources or strategies to help them catch up in a way that maximizes their state aid and that kind of thing. So I can see that the building condition survey could be, you know, a serious tool for them right off the bat, because that's going to tell them where their greatest needs are. But are there other resources too to help school districts that may need to do some catch-up?
Well, there's a couple other strategies that I see districts using, and the first and foremost and the most important is to have the entire school community, whether we're referring to the Board of Education or the administration or the community and taxpayers as a whole. It's critical to understand the benefit of regular capital investment because of that cost allowance issue, and because the maximum amount of state money you can generate is by making sure that your projects don't exceed the cost allowance. Mm-hmm. If your projects don't exceed the cost allowance, then all of your projects are eligible for aid, and therefore you have no portion of the construction that is at 100% local share. The best way to do that is to get the community on board with the need for regular 5-year bond issues. The successful districts have bond issues every 5 years. And as a result, as I mentioned, the roof may be 5 years old, the windows may be 10 years old, the heating system may be 15 years old. So this 5-year cycle, we're going to concentrate on electrical, whether that's fire alarm upgrades, public address, electrical lighting, technology, those kinds of things. So again, none of the project results in the significant $40 million effort needed to bring it up to repair because nothing has been done in so long. So the biggest thing is recognizing how to best take advantage of the formula and educating the community about that. Another option or possibility, of course, is to reduce your expenditures to the extent possible. And that means, in many cases, consolidation. We have very few districts in the state that have increasing enrollment at this point in time. Very few. And so when we see districts that have significant excess space that they're operating, that's wasted tax dollars. We have districts that can consolidate many school facilities into a smaller amount and thereby over time save the staff expenses, save the heating and lighting and cooling expenses, save the maintenance expenses, everything from plowing parking lots to trash pickup to everything else that goes along with operating a facility. If you are not operating as efficiently as possible, it does two things. One, it causes you to have to spread your maintenance, your available maintenance dollars farther because you have more facilities to maintain with the same amount of money. And two, it causes you to have to do it less efficiently. You have to employ more staff at more locations instead of concentrating the available dollars on fewer facilities that you can operate based on the decreased enrollment. We have districts that have come to us for renovation projects of facilities. When we calculate, they have in excess of 70 classrooms that they don't need. And as you can imagine, we simply said, no, I'm sorry, you're not entitled to aid on the renovation of that facility because you don't need that facility. And I think that was a surprise to them, and we're starting to see more and more of that. So districts need to take as much local action as possible, again, to educate the community about the appropriate right sizing of a district to stop operating facilities that are no longer needed and wasting the money that goes with that, and other sources as well, like energy production. Solar panels, for example, have come down significantly in price. And stay tuned as the Governor's Office and the State Education Department and NYPA and NYSERDA roll out a program called K-Solar. And collectively, we are all encouraging school districts to enter into power purchase agreements to produce electrical energy on your properties at no cost to you. So all of those kinds of things will help districts reduce their costs and conserve capital dollars so they can be invested in the most important priorities first. Most important is to understand the benefit of the formulas and the fact that they need to be regularly accessed.
Okay, that's an excellent answer. Thank you. Matt, do we have any more questions?
We do not have any questions.
Okay, if anyone would like to ask a question, this is your last chance. We're going to sign off soon, but that was extremely helpful. I just, it was very to the point and very useful. So thank you for your expertise and help, Carl. We appreciate you doing this and taking the time to partner with us at New York State ASBO. And thanks to all of the audience for participating. Matt, last check on the questions. Are we good?
We're clear.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody, for participating, and thank you, Carl.